Good evening, viewers. Another episode of Guest with Nazir. Today, we are discussing a special subject which matters you, me, everybody in the society, and it is IT, social media, and so on. So we have a special guest. He's a solicitor, and he has also a special role at Chancery Lane. Welcome in my show, Peter.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you for joining me today. It's quite interesting that you have dealt with criminal law, you have dealt with litigation, and now you deal with a very specialist area, which is IT and technology.
Yes, yeah. Interesting background, I suppose. I trained in London and the South East and indeed started off doing criminal law, so the odd murder trial, things like that. And then sort of I moved up to Sheffield, had a really good role with one of the large firms here in Sheffield doing litigation. And indeed, while I was doing that, I started getting very heavily involved in data protection work and getting a real understanding of how that worked. So it's been an interesting journey, yes.
So which year you qualified as a solicitor?
Oh, that's a question. 2004. So yes, I had the big 10 years last year, which is quite frightening because you spend all that time, as you know, sort of working very hard to qualify, and that seems to take forever. And then the last 10 years just goes very, very quickly.
And where you born?
I was born in Stoke-on-Trent. So whereas we're in the Steel City here, Stoke-on-Trent, people will know is the Potteries. So I grew up there with everyone always looking at the undersides of plates and things to see where something's made, whereas I know the thing here, everyone always looks at the cutlery to see where that's made. So a little bit of similarity there, I suppose.
So how you decided that you want to become a solicitor? Do you have any ideal at that time in your mind?
No, it wasn't really until I came to go to university and I had to decide where I was going to go and what I was going to study. And law seemed like a really good fit. But actually, I remember being halfway through my law degree and thinking, I don't want to be a solicitor. So I wasn't even choosing the right subjects within the degree to be able to qualify as a solicitor. And it was only then when I sat down before starting my final year to think, actually, what do I want to do? I thought, I've actually started to really enjoy this. I thought, so I'll definitely carry on and be a solicitor. So, yeah, that was about when I was 20 years old. So quite late. You get some people who are, I think, running around as kids and in their teens thinking, yes, I definitely want to be a lawyer. But I really only came to me a little bit later, I suppose.
And what is your role with the local law society? And I believe you have also a very keen role and very important role at the Chancery Lane. So could you please put light on it?
Yeah. I represent the constituency of Yorkshire for the Law Society at Chancery Lane in London. So that's the National Law Society. So they have an election every 4 years for the constituency. And I was re-elected last year from about 6,000 solicitors who are in this part of the world, where there's a large proportion of solicitors in Yorkshire compared to the rest of the country, so a big constituency to represent. And I'm elected there every 4 years, and I've now just been coming up to 10 years on the Law Society Council representing Yorkshire. And in addition to that, also at Chancery Lane, I'm the chair of the Technology and Law Reference Group, which is the committee of the Law Society that specifically focuses on technology and law-related issues. So policy around data protection, and we're always looking at new areas. So we've got our next meeting next week, actually, at Chancery Lane, and we'll be looking at things like the use of drones, which is happening increasingly. So, for example, estate agents sending a drone up to go and take photographs of someone's property, and then what if it takes photographs of the property next door? Or you sitting reading the newspaper, and that goes up on a property website.
So it means also it could be a part of privacy of somebody else.
Exactly. So massive invasion of privacy issues is already happening when people go and take footage using a drone. They put it up on YouTube. What if the people in there haven't consented? What if it records things it shouldn't? And these are the sorts of issues that in 2015 are becoming increasingly common, not least the wish of the fact an awful lot of people had drones for Christmas. So there's far more drones now around in the country and around the world taking footage, and this is creating a big issue.
Thank you. Now we quickly proceed towards our questions. In these days, everybody, almost every individual, is using social media. And because the way technology is moving, the danger and apprehensions and risks are also increasing. So if somebody is using social media, so is there any precaution they could take when using it?
Yes, just be very careful about the information that you're actually sharing. People a little bit older, our generation, I think tend to look at social media with a certain amount of risk. You know, we originally grew up not necessarily sharing everything about our lives. There's a generation now, when I go and speak to university students, or if you sit on the bus and you see the average teenager is welded to their mobile phone and they're communicating through BlackBerry Messenger, Twitter, Facebook, sharing huge amounts of information without questioning it, without thinking, should I be doing this? And the key thing really when you're using Facebook, when you're using Twitter, any type of social media, is to think, do I need to be sharing all this information? Do you need to have on your phone the location enabled so that whenever you make a post on Twitter, when you make a post on Facebook, it says they're in this location or who they're with? You and I will know as lawyers, we have to be very, very careful. For example, you don't want to give away your location saying, I'm about to see this client to discuss this. It's client confidential. You shouldn't be saying who your clients are or what you're going to be discussing with them. But I know one lawyer who uses LinkedIn a lot, based in the States. And he's always saying, oh, just flying in here, taking some evidence, doing this sort of thing. And one time he said, oh, I've just landed in Detroit, taking some really important evidence on such and such a case on a medical malpractice issue. So I then dropped him a line and said, do you really want to be broadcasting that to the rest of the world? And I'm on the other side of the Atlantic here seeing this. Would your client be over the moon about that? He went, oh, yeah, good point. I mean, his argument was it was a piece of public litigation. So you could go along to the court and see who's suing who. But there's still the issue of should you be sharing that information so widely. So I think that illustrates the point, going back to your question. If you're going to use social media safely, and I believe that we should, indeed, I think if you aren't using social media now, it's a big part of your life that you're not engaging with because of what we do.
Is there any way that can be curtailed or limited in kind of any disclaimer with it or any wording?
People try and do that to a large extent. Every time you go onto someone's Twitter profile, very often they'll say, the views and opinions expressed are here on my own and not those of my employer. That is utterly meaningless and pointless. They're just covering themselves so they can hold that up to the employer if they go and tweet something at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning that they really shouldn't, something like that. But really, it doesn't make an awful lot of odds. If someone's saying something that, say, is discriminatory on some grounds, and that's being put out there, whether they've got a little disclaimer on there saying, oh, well, it's my opinion and not that of my employer, your employer's not going to be over the moon about it anyway. In the same way, you may have seen on Facebook recently, a few times people have started circulating information about basically putting in a big status update that constitutes a large statement saying, I do not consent to Facebook's new privacy settings. And they've cut and pasted it because they've seen someone else had done it and they thought, oh, they have to do this. I'd recommend everyone, all of your viewers, to take a look at a site called Snopes, S-N-O-P-E-S, snopes.com. And if you go in there and then search for Facebook privacy notice, and it'll come up and it'll tell you that disclaimer, amongst several other disclaimers that keep doing the rounds on Facebook, are, again, utterly pointless. If you're going onto a social network, you are bound by their terms and conditions, their privacy notice. So make sure you know what's in there, and if you're not happy about it, limit it. So, for example, on Facebook, you should be able to limit all of your posts so that, for example, only your friends can see them, not anyone. There's over 1 billion users on there. Do you want all of them to be able to see what you're saying at any given time? Probably not. But the other thing for your viewers to bear very closely in mind is that Facebook regularly changes its privacy settings. Sometimes it only takes a matter of a few months and it changes again. And you could have very carefully gone through and said, I only want certain family and friends or certain people to be able to see what my statuses are and what my photos are. And then sometimes Facebook can toggle them all because it said, oh, we've changed our statement and therefore it's all open again. So always go in there very regularly to your privacy settings and check that all of those are in the settings that they should be and that they haven't been toggled back to being totally open again.
Thank you. Another similar question, but a little bit different way. I will rephrase it. If somebody hasn't got Facebook account, but his private photos or his family's photos has been shared by a third party, what remedies he has against the person who is sharing these?
Actually, quite a bit of information, funnily enough. There's quite a few things you can do, because technically, if someone is putting up a photograph of an individual on there, that constitutes personal data relating to that individual. Personal data under the UK Data Protection Act is defined as anything that allows an individual to be identified. So photograph, audio recording, video recording, that's personal data. You would have to give your consent for that to go up on the social media site. And if it's gone up without your consent, you therefore are entitled to say, please remove that, that's a breach of my data protection. If it isn't, you technically could make a complaint to the Information Commissioner, which is ico.gov.uk, or you could potentially, if you feel there is a loss you've sustained as a result of that, or say it is portraying you in a poor light. You know, what if someone's photoshopped an image of you into a scene where you never were that could be a little unflattering, shall we say. Let's let our imagination run wild for a minute. If something like that were to happen, you could technically say, look, you've defamed me. You have lowered my the estimation that people would have of me reasonably by appearing in this image, and therefore I'm going to make a claim against you for that. So you could technically have the remedy of going to court over it. So therefore, before you put any photos up on Facebook, you should really think, do I have the consent of people to do this?
Another question is similarly question. If somebody has put his or her picture on his or her own page, and a third party picks up that picture and share it on their own wall, and different people start putting some comments, which could be derogatory, which could be abusive, and that person, when he or she came to know, they just raised the question, where that person whose picture has been added to somebody's wall stands, whether he or she can take a legal action against that person who is putting somebody's picture on his or our wall, and then the people are putting some comments which are could be defamatory,
Sure.
that could be abusive, that was not respectful comments.
A lot of it indeed would depend on exactly what those comments were. So if you're being involved or in a exchange on there that becomes, you know, very discriminatory, very inflammatory, there could be remedies available there. Technically, for example, you know, if threats are made, or if there is harassment that takes place, which is a series of, say, 2 or more posts where someone is saying, you know, making threats along lines that it can be clearly construed by anyone looking at them as a threat, you can potentially take action. I mean, we are sometimes talking here about criminal offences as well, of course, when you're looking at the Harassment Act, when you're looking potentially, even if it's particularly nasty threats, you can argue it's assault. But if we're looking more at a general, you know, comments that you aren't happy with that are made.
In terms of removing that, if somebody wants to say that why you have add my picture and can you please remove it, because the comments which are coming from your friends or from your links are not very respectful, so can you please remove these? So,
indeed, you can ask them to take it down, and if they won't, arguably you can actually approach Facebook or Twitter or whoever is the social media site operator and bring it to their attention and say, please take it down. That can be a particular issue if you didn't consent to that going on there, because you can argue that from a copyright point of view, that's taking my image, and that's putting it on there, and I didn't consent to it go on there, I didn't consent to being associated in any way, shape or form with what has subsequently transpired on this page. So in certain instances, depending what the content is that's being shared, depending what the comments are made, then it's worth approaching the social media provider because of the laws that have been breached. That can sometimes remedy it just by having it taken down. But again, depending on the comments that have been made, then you can sometimes have recourse in terms of criminal charges or a civil action. It would depend on exactly what had been made. And there, as I say, I'd use the word discrimination because, of course, that comes to you know, the Equality Act and the fact that if you've got any comments that are made on grounds that could be on the grounds of, you know, disability discrimination, race, religion, ethnicity, all these sorts of things, of course, under that Act, they are, illegal. It is discriminatory. So once you can start saying that it is a clear breach of that, then you can start doing something about it in terms of legal remedy.
Thank you. What is the position of the evidence if somebody has put some picture or some tweet on social media and same has been used against that person or individual who is putting it by the employer or any trial, because sometimes these things are used in evidence. So what is the position of admissibility of this evidence?
Well, first of all, if anything's going to be potentially used as evidence, or you see something that either defames you or is particularly upsetting or whatever, and that you wish to make a point using it, make sure you take a screenshot of it. Don't presume that just because it's in that exchange at the moment, it might get deleted. It could be lost further down the line. So it's important that if anything ever does give you a course of action, as it were, take the screenshots, save them as a JPEG file or a picture file of some sort, because then it will ensure that you've got that information ready to be used as evidence in future. Now, in terms then of its admissibility, it would depend on, it's coming down to being a bit more subjective, what's actually been said in there, what's being talked about, who are the people who are referred to in there as well. Because if it's just you and another individual who either you're complaining about, you have the issue with, that's okay. But if there's a wide range of people in there who are no party to this, then obviously they aren't going to particularly want their information to be dragged through it as well.
Apart from legal practice, what are your hobbies?
Oh, that's a good question. Now you put me on the spot. I should emphasise, given that I run a law firm and we're only sort of coming up to our first year running, an awful lot of my time and effort has gone into that. The bit of time that I do have spare, I follow Formula One Grand Prix racing, and I'm also a big cricket fan as well. So looking forward to the Cricket World Cup that's coming up in Australia shortly. And I also really enjoy hill walking. So it's one of the things I love about being in Sheffield is less than half an hour, you're out on the peaks and can spend a lovely Sunday morning just taking in the air and seeing the views there. I think that's why this city is one of the best places in the country, because you've got a great city where you can do the work that you need to, great connectivity, but we've got some fantastic countryside around about as well. And
who is your favourite cricketer?
Well, it was Alistair Cook, and it probably still is. I think he's a fantastic cricketer. It's a shame that I think his form has suffered since he was made captain. It recovered a little bit last year, but I think he's still licking his wounds a bit after the Ashes. But I think he's been a fantastic ambassador for the game, and to have got the record number of centuries scored by an England Test cricketer at such a young age, I think is an incredible achievement.
Thank you. And what is your short message for our viewers?
Just think very, very carefully before you share information online and who you share it with. We always end up sharing so much information. I've got one of these things. It's called a Fitbit. It's wearable technology, the new thing now. So I know how many steps I do each day, how many miles I walk, all these sorts of things. And it's very popular now that people share this information all the time. But be careful who you share it with.
Thank you. This was episode of Guest with Nazir. I hope in coming programs we'll discuss more IT, more information, and more interesting subject for you. Keep watching Sheffield Live TV. Thank you.